Welcome to Saxton on the Pod. In today's episode, we're thrilled to have on Bryce Johnson, serial entrepreneur and startup founder. With a remarkable track record as an operator and/or advisor in 8 different startups, including notable ventures like Cafe Scribe, Zarbee, and Thuma, Bryce brings a wealth of experience to the table. Currently spearheading LooLoo, an innovative air care brand, Bryce shares insights into his entrepreneurial path from its inception to the present. We dive into the highs and lows of building successful ventures, discussing the challenges, triumphs, and invaluable lessons learned along the way. From navigating the complexities of startup life to carving out a niche in competitive markets, Bryce's journey offers inspiration and valuable insights for aspiring entrepreneurs and seasoned business leaders alike. Tune in as we uncover the stories behind the entrepreneur, the struggles of starting a company, and much more.
Bryce, well, welcome. The first question that I have for you, and I put some thought into this, is: are you a gambler?
I'm not.
Would you consider an entrepreneur being a gambler?
Yes, I think it's it's actually pretty heavy bets. And every startup I've done has been a heavy bet. Not everyone has worked out. One that went sideways, and I lost a lot of personal money.
Was that early on?
No, I was actually right after Zarbee's. I did a mobile game, and it did well. I mean, we were like number 2 in the our category, which was trivia, but it was a good learning experience of how difficult it is. I think that's the most competitive space I've ever played in. I have software background, but it was in the enterprise space, and I had this idea that I wanted to take to market. And I had a co-founder that I had worked with in the prior e-textbook startup. Phenomenal developer, just a genius mind, West Point grad, and we put it together, and a lot of the money was mine. I did raise a little bit of outside capital, and through 3 different pivots, I finally had to come to the realization that this we needed to shut it down. It was like someone I have a bucket and someone took a shotgun and shot the bucket, and
It was bleeding everywhere.
It was bleeding. You just could not keep the consumer in, and that's one of the real tests: is how long can you keep? We had a couple whales that were pretty, fascinating to watch, but whales meaning players that were, big spenders and would stick, but you really need a good percentage to stick around in the gaming space.
So your journey is interesting because you've had a lot of success in different ventures, but you've also had some failures.
Yeah, sure.
And that's why I found that question interesting, because I think that you have taken some gambles. When I say gambling, you probably thought craps table.
Yeah.
Realize. So we kind of know, and we're gonna get to where you're at now and what you're doing now, the success that you've had. But tell us a little bit about kind of your upbringing, your initial journey, education into your first startup, because there's so many stories about entrepreneurs. They're all different, right? And an entrepreneur by definition is someone who doesn't collect a paycheck. They're out there
grinding.
They have a new idea, right? Trying to bring that idea to market for a profit to help others. Tell us a little bit about kind of early on, when you were a youngster, when you were a teenager. Did you always want to do this, or kind of how did things evolve from your adolescence?
That's a good question. So at the age of 10, I started, working for my grandpa, and he was an entrepreneur. My dad also was part of that company. It was a development company, land development. And
where was that at?
Here in Salt Lake. It's called Horman Construction and Legacy Development. They did a lot of strip malls, so the Cottonwood Mall, the Valley Fair Mall, business units, and also land development like Pepperwood. I just idolized what they were doing. My grandpa, so I worked in his yard, worked in his garden with him, and so he, back in the day, he built up quite an enterprise. I don't know if it was ever as big as like Jacobson, but he had a name, and I would just sit and talk with him at lunch and on Saturdays. And he grew up on a farm in I think Bear River, and I just loved what he was doing. And I always thought, gee, it'd be fun to become someone that had their own business. And I struggled in school, and I had to push through a lot of pain, and so I'm going to find a way to build my own startup and my own business. Then I fell in love with clothing, and I think I was probably 13 or 14. I started.
That's how space.
It isn't. Yeah. I got it. Yeah. So from I was 13 or 14, my friend who was an artist, his name is Seth Bradley, and he's got his own startup.
So I didn't know you were close with Seth. Yeah.
Yeah, super close. Like he and I have known each other since we were in second grade.
Okay. Yeah.
And we started our first little start. He was the artist, and I was the sales guy, and we did a clothing gear. I idolized Ralph Lauren, and so we had this thing called Ryan Lane as both our middle names. And we just did T-shirts. And where we made some money was doing T-shirts for like the Alta cheer and football team and wrestling team, and some other high schools. And then we also would make like Grateful Dead shirts or whatever and sell them in parking lots.
Yeah.
And
How old were you?
I think we started it when we were 13.
Oh, you were young, ran it through middle school, high school.
And then I was doing what really gave me money was I started a lawn business. So I was doing landscaping and lawns, and my brother and I had, I don't know how many lawns that we were doing, but it was a good way to sock away a lot of money.
Yeah.
And then I would do this as a way to start my own brand. And then I just, decided to do a mission, and Seth and I left that company, and Seth kept on pushing and ended up selling it after our mission. I got back from my mission, and he went on to do what he's doing now, which is a little bit of the, that component of, but that I'm sure was not the genesis of it. But yeah, that was my first.
We know Seth. He's an incredible artist.
Oh yeah, phenomenal.
A phenomenal. In fact, short sidebar, I was with Seth in Italy, and we ate in this like super bougie restaurant.
Yeah.
And I know Seth has like all kinds of different things he's involved in.
Yeah.
And the dude picked up a guitar, was the owner, and all of a sudden there's 50, he's playing like a legit song, starts, bellowing out all these lyrics, and I'm like, holy hell, I had no idea.
He is incredibly talented in anything he does. Like, I'd go skiing with him, and then he'd do a backflip, front flip. I'm really, dude, you've never done that before. He's just one of those very talented and coordinated individuals, but it was fun. He'd always laugh because he would slay. He was hand painting these T-shirts for a while, and then we got silk screens, and then we got a octopus thing, and we got better and better. But for a while, he was hand painting our T-shirts. And
so, were you using the funds from the lawn care and things like that to fund? Is that at that age?
The T-shirts my mom paid for was just your hands. And then we would buy some of the paints and stuff, and then we grind it out, and then we'd sell them to. We went to like Wasatch Touring and try to get a line into the Wasatch Touring and and other different T-shirt or outdoor places. We were really into the outdoors.
Okay.
So it was fun. It was a good experience and taught me a lot, and appreciated my mom's support and his mom's support.
And then you mentioned I cut you off, but you served a mission.
Yeah. I did Chile. That's where I went, and my son actually just called to Chile too.
Really? That's awesome.
So it was kind of fun.
That's cool. So we're both return missionaries as well, LDS Church. You learn a lot.
You do.
You learn denial. You learn how to talk to people.
Mm-hmm.
The one thing that I learned, I'm interested to hear your take on what you brought home from that, is you go in so many households.
Mm-hmm.
You see so many walks of life, poor, rich, dysfunctional families that function really well. And for me, growing up in a small town in Idaho, it was so revealing as to how people live their lives.
Mm-hmm.
It was the first time at age 19 I was able to see hundreds of families a week, or thousands throughout my mission, and you kind of learn how you want to pattern your life. I was in the States, in Chile, but what did you pull from those 2 years out preaching the gospel?
It's a good question.
That still benefits you to this day.
Well, this scar is from my second day on my mission. My mountain bike broke in half, and
are you serious?
I spent the first 30 days in the hospital, the next 30 days in bed. It was pretty nasty. Other than that, that was just a sidebar. Hard work, organization. I think, how do you, back then Chile was a high baptizing. It was like 500, 600 a month.
And what year was this?
This is 92.
Okay.
And it was a lot of teaching. You know, we're doing 25 to 30 lessons a day. And, you know, working hard. And I think one of the things that was hard for me is learning the language and, you know, hammering down and figuring that out and just learning to love people that you know, never knew. So I thought it was such a great experience. Loved every minute of it and wouldn't trade it for anything. So.
Yeah, there's, I know the depth that comes from that. So many entrepreneurs in Utah bring home just a wealth of knowledge from the mission field. So you get back, you start making t-shirts again, or what happened from there?
No, I came back and I remember going to Seth's like a few days after I got back and he had built it into a huge warehouse and he was cranking. I was like, wow, this is awesome. What a cool thing. But no, I didn't go back into that. I started at BYU and was very focused on figuring out. I floated around a lot. I should have kept to what I knew I wanted to do as startups, but I didn't. I ended up, you know, having taken a lot of psychology, philosophy, botany was almost a declared major of mine, English, and finally I'm like, you know what, I really like business. I need to go study that, and I've kind of focused on marketing. And then I think it was the second year, I found it was like the very first year that they were selling, or second year they were selling pest control. And one of my buddies, he had gone the first year, it was the very first company. He came back and he's like, hey dude, I made $30,000. I'm like, that was unheard of back then.
Yeah, 94, 95. Yeah.
And so I convinced a really good friend of mine named Shane Osborne, and the two of us went down to Visalia in California and sold. And that was actually harder to sell pest control for me than religion, which kind of
really, that's interesting.
Well, Chile, there's a lot of believers. And I remember Shane helping me figure out, you know, how to get it, because he was quite good at it. And, you know, by the end of the summer, did quite well and was excited about that. And, but I knew I wanted to start a startup. I just didn't know what. But during that time, Shane's like, hey, let's go up to Northern Cal and see, you know, this university called Berkeley. And he took me up there and we're walking around. I'm like, I want to go here. This would be so cool.
San Francisco
area. Yeah. And so I got completely OCD on going to a top 10 MBA school and wouldn't let go. And thankfully I have a very patient wife, because it took a while to, like, you know, do the test prep and get in. But ended up going there and going to grad school. And that's when I came up with the first idea. I didn't think I was going to get out of grad school and start my first startup. I thought it was going to be like 5-10 years after that. But there was two very big catalysts to cause me to do a start. Berkeley made you do this. It was actually a combined program between Berkeley and Columbia in New York. So I was flying back and forth between the two campuses. Columbia was very
real big names.
It was super fun. And my cohort, that's actually this weekend is our 20th anniversary, or not anniversary, reunion.
Yeah.
I absolutely loved the experience. It was just sort of like it was a executive program that met Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and I'd fly home on Sunday, and we'd do that every other week. And I just love and adore everybody in there. But there was a specific person that completely changed my direction, and her name is Maronell. And what happened is she, you know, for 2 years we're in this cohort, and it's 70 people. We're all taking the same classes, doing different study groups. And I always respected her. She was probably, I don't want to say 50 at the time. And she would sit at the front of the class. I was in the very back, always. And I would sit and watch her, because we had a very wide array. We had guys that sold their company for $2 billion. They were just there just for the knowledge.
Yeah.
And I would watch Maura. She had done 4 startups. Her husband was CTO at Boeing. And I'd hear what she'd say. And I never really hung out with her, never really knew her, maybe said hi to her in the, you know, here and there. But one day, I think it was the last semester, we had to do a project that was basically a business plan for something. And I was frustrated because I was flying back and forth between the universities with a suitcase full of textbooks back then. And so I did a business plan on e-textbooks. I'm like, no one's doing it.
So now I'm seeing the...
Yes. Well, it was my wife that inspired. I was reading my kids. I was reading Isaac books at night and see it. And so I'm like, I should do an e-book for kids. And my wife's like, there's no money on that. You should do something for college students, because there's a real pain. Heavy textbooks.
Yeah.
It's $1,000 a semester or a year. And so she turned me on that. I built out the plan, and there was so much roadkill in ebooks at that time. This is way predate. This is right when iTunes had released.
Okay.
The first downloadable iTunes. And so I said, why not create iTunes, but for e-textbooks?
Yeah.
And that was the business plan. And Maura, bless her soul, one day just passed me in the cafeteria, said, I was like, what are you working on? And really it was like that. And I said, well, I've got this, business plan. She's like, can I take a look at it? And the financial model, I said, sure, knock yourself out. She looked at it. She's like, can I take this tonight? I'm like, yeah, so put you to sleep. And she came back the next morning. She's like, I'll invest in this. I'm like, are you serious? She's like, yeah, totally. I'm like, you barely know me.
Yeah.
And she's like, no, I have confidence this is going to be something big. And that gave me, so there was that piece. And then the second was I was leading a product management group over at Enterprise Software, so SaaS company. Phenomenal. It was sort of like Domo, but actually a lot of engineers from my company went to that. And we had well-funded, we were doing AI, we were doing some very serious Department of Defense products. This is like right after 9/11. And one of my very close guys that I was working with, named Rob Christensen, we had a really bad day with the CEO. I was reporting to the CEO, and he came in and just basically, after we had worked 9 days over a huge project, and just basically threw up on this project that we were working on. And Rob looked at me, and he'd read my business plan, and he's like, hey, Bryce, I like your business plan. I'm going to go do it. I'm resigning right now. He put a letter of resignation. He reported to me, and he's like, I'm out of here. And I'm like, seriously? He's like, yeah, and I'm going to do your business plan, and you've got 2 weeks to figure out what you're going to do. And so between Maura and Rob, and then I mortgaged my house to get the financing. Maura didn't end up investing for about a year, but she still invested in a very sketchy time. Ended up deciding to do that. But those two people were, very significant in taking that plunge.
Was it the confidence they put in the plan that made you believe that you had something, or did you? What did they say to you, or was it? Hey,
yeah,
two people that I respect, they see this plan and they believe in this plan. That I got to do it.
Yeah. So
would you have done it otherwise?
I don't think so. So Maura was the sage, I guess, and she gave me the confidence. So she became an advisor, and then I made her chairman of the board. She was a board member and investor. But she gave me the confidence that there was something there enough to go to my dad and mom and say, hey, I'm going to do this, and my wife. So my dad ended up investing about 6 months in. I was the first investor, then my dad, and then Maura. And I just really didn't know, could I do this? But she definitely gave me that confidence. And as much as you learn in business school, there was the first week I was like, holy cow, I don't know anything.
Yeah, the real world.
Real slap in the face. And putting together the first convertible note and raising that money from outside people. And I thought it was going to come instantaneously. I should tell you, the business plan included, back then, MIT had a group that had built this thing called e-ink, which is what they use in the Kindle. This has predated the Kindle. Kindle was not even on the radar.
And this fall 2001?
It was 2003.
2003. Okay.
Yeah. So iTunes had come out, and I was obsessed with this, idea of a black and white screen where you could see really well and not, kill your eyes. And so Maura and I flew over to Philips Electronics in the Netherlands and tried to do a deal with them where they would make the device and we would come up with the software and load it with textbooks. But that started out, it was really fast, 3 years. And within 3 years, we ended up selling it. We had some fairly sizable companies that came in to buy it. And it was 2 times. We had some interesting groups that were, anywhere from Google to, Barnes & Noble, Owlet, which are, e-textbook providers. And then suddenly they all disappeared. And we decided to, push forward through the pain and just go to our own. And then about 8 months later, we had another interesting buyer that was a catalyst that basically said, hey, let's sell this right now. So it was about a 3-year time period and fraught with a lot of challenge. But, there was another guy that came in and ended up investing. It was from private equity in the LA area. And he was extremely helpful as well as in terms of figuring out what do we do here with this. But and this is right when Google was like scanning all these books. And the Google relationship was a classmate of mine that I introduced to a friend of mine that was at Google in the early days. He got hired in, and then he was like, this is really cool what you're doing. And then I got presenting at Google. They looked at it really seriously. And anyhow, it was really at the, beginning of online learning.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask. You had to have been the market was there, but you're almost creating a new market. People are kind of like e-textbooks, or was it easily adopted?
No, it was a challenge. So here's the problem. It's what I call a classic chicken and egg. So
yeah,
Uber is a chicken and egg. You got to get the number of people, and you download it, and you got the number of people that want to drive. And they did a great job. Airbnb, both of them did a great job at focusing on a specific location and utilizing something that was already in place, which like those black lumos. And they put Uber, apps on those guys, and that's how they really and they did it in San Francisco, and that's how they started to demonstrate that, hey, this works. For us, the chicken and egg is we needed to get all these students to be aware that these textbooks were available for download, which is hard. And
how did you do that?
Partly the bookstores and professors. So Rob came up with this genius idea. It was like, hey, we can't really do a lot of graphics on these e-ink devices. We ended up bailing on the e-ink device because students don't want to pay another $700 for another thing. They already had their laptops. Yeah. A lot of the fodder that roadkill in the e-book space was, and even in e-textbooks, students didn't have laptops in 1999 or 2000. By 2003 and 4, there was about a 75% penetration, especially in graduate school, and in law school, it was everybody had a laptop. And so we focused on law books.
Okay, so you didn't have to overcome the hardware.
Yeah, so there was 3 publishers, Aspen, Thompson, and West. And those were the publishers that were and so we didn't have to get as much content, but convincing those, billions of dollars, these huge companies to give us textbooks was not easy.
Did you have to go in with some sort of licensing agreement or outright buy what
they had? An agreement and convincing them that this is there was no one else doing this at the time. Well, actually, there was one company that is still around, and that was a challenge. It was a challenge all the way through the sell of the company. We sold to a massive, they're basically behind the scenes. They're running, I think, the majority of all the textbook stores in the United States, like Notre Dame. They help with BYU, and I was introduced to them through the BYU bookstore manager, and they ended up being the ones that bought us. And a phenomenal family company, like fourth generation now in Chicago. Wonderful family, phenomenal. Like the core values of that company for being like 150 years old it was such a great marriage, and they wanted to have a platform for their students, and then they ended up advertising it in the bookstores. You can buy this or you can get it for half off by downloading it on this. It was called Cafe Scribe.
Yeah. So Cafe Scribe is the name of the company.
Yeah.
Did you, in that process, it sounds like you had to pivot a few times.
We did. It was painful.
I'm interested to know from your schooling, because you mentioned, hey, a weekend to like actually doing this was like, death by shotgun of information.
Yeah.
How did you transition from school into the workplace and then learn to pivot? You know what I mean? Was that shocking? You thought you had an idea, boom, we're going to go at it. Oh, we got to make a left here. We got to make a right here. I'm in another intersection. Because I think that as we talk more about these other businesses, there comes a point where maybe it's just not a good idea.
Yeah.
Maybe it's time to just pull the ripcord, move on to the next phase of life.
And so such a hard call.
I'm interested to know, because you've done this, a dozen times now with different entities and companies. How do you know when you have a good idea, you just need to pivot, for example, with this story that you just mentioned, or, hey, it's time that this is probably not a good idea. Let's get out. Did you ever have those thoughts in that process? If not, did you have them every day? You know what I mean?
Yeah, and I had them with Zarbees.
Really?
Oh yeah, like crazy. People all say, oh yeah, that was going to be a success from day one. I pitched 200, guys for money. No one wanted to give me money.
Yeah.
It was just as difficult as every other one. But with it was actually through, I started talking to Mara probably 2 to 3 times a week, sometimes every night. She was a very involved. I mean, she was more like a co-founder with Robin
in Cafe Scribe.
Yeah, in Cafe Scribe, and she was just so well seasoned. She now teaches entrepreneurship and new venture finance at Berkeley, and I go and guest speak in her class, once or twice a year, and I love it.
You stayed in touch with her for?
Oh yeah. No, we talk a lot still, and she's invested in almost, I think, every one of my startups since, if not every single one. She. With Cafe Scribe and Zarbee's being the best ones for her. I remember when we were struggling, she called me up. She's like, hey, it's common to pivot 3 times at least in a startup. Just so you know, it's just something you have to do. And so she kind of gave me that breathing room to be okay with pivoting and changing direction. But when she invested, we had basically lost a number of big accounts, and there was not a lot of prospects, and she freaking flew down from Seattle and wrote a $200,000 check. We were paying ourselves, at this time I had like a 7-year arm on my house in Pepperwood. It was going to explode any minute, and I was paying myself $1,000 a month, and Rob was paying himself $1,000 a month, and that's what we were living on. And for, having 2 kids at home, I always, I make fun of Isaac. I said, dude, your birthdays consisted of me making like obstacle courses in the backyard. Those were the best ones. I
don't care. Kids don't care. I think about, the time, they just don't care.
They just know you love them.
Dad, they want smiles. They want happy times.
Yeah.
They don't care.
And Becky, my wife, reminds me, she's like, you remember we didn't hit a movie or go out to dinner for 3 straight years. And I don't remember that, but
this makes me like you so much more. Like you're successful, you come with an aura, and people know about your success here locally, certainly.
I try to
hear these stories is like, I think it's so great, and young people that want to do it, it's just so great to hear about the times there was
it's all tough, it's all tough,
and you just learn to grind through it.
She used to always say, and I use this a lot, you gotta, like a horse with blinders. Sometimes you just
exactly,
and grind through, and it's hard.
A lot of was there some disbelief with family members or those around you that, hey, what's he doing? Because we mentioned Mara, and who was the other? Rob, and kind of the belief they instilled in you. But was there some disbelief during that time? How did you deal with that?
So I actually was pretty good at grinding through a lot of things until there was one, and it was almost 6 or 8 months before we sold, that I came home. It was before we got this, and I can't really reveal the name, but we got an unsolicited offer to buy the company from a fairly sizable company out of nowhere. Actually, it wasn't totally out of nowhere. It was through a connection, but I remember coming home and saying, hey, Beck, I'm done. I can't do this anymore. I just don't know how we're going to make this work. And she thankfully just said, hey, you know what? You can't give up now. You got to push through. I remember vividly coming home one night and thinking that this is not going to work out here. And then suddenly we got this, unsolicited offer. And it ended up creating a scenario where a couple different other companies wanted to come in and look and buy it. And we ended up exiting. And it was about when we ended up selling, and then 3 or 4 weeks later, Lehman Brothers tanks and the world falls apart.
We remember that one.
Yeah. But it was right.
Yeah.
It was a painful time.
It was a
good timing.
No, it was even the CEO of the company that bought us, he called me up and he's like, dude, I'm pretty sure we wouldn't buy you had this happened.
Yeah.
He's like, I'm grateful we did. And I ended up staying with that company for about 3 years until a mission companion of mine called me up and said, hey, actually, I had Zarbee's come across my desk twice. The day I sold Cafe Scribe, it was actually, the entity name was called 1440 after the year Gutenberg invented the printing press. But the day I sold that company, my brother-in-law sends me this PPM that he put together. He was at Holland & Hart law firm, and he's like, hey, this is a cool company.
There was some time and placement,
it was for Honey Naturals. And I looked at it, and the valuation was insane. And I just said, there's no way I'm going to invest in this. And it's freaking water and honey water
for kids.
Yeah. So I just said, no. And then about 2 years later, a companion and close friend of mine from the mission called me up and he's like, hey, take a look at this. He was like, do you have anybody I can network this with? And I introduced him to some people and then I didn't hear about him. Then he ended up moving into the neighborhood and I reconnected with him and he's like, hey, we take a look at this. And it took me almost 6 months to warm up to Zarbee's because what I struggled with is textbooks is a $4 billion space. And yes, it had its issues, but I could see getting 1% of that and still having a really decent company. With children's cough syrup is $600 million. I'm like, where do you go from that? Are you getting, to get 1% is really hard. And we ended up getting 34% at the end, but it still was really hard.
Yeah.
We ended up, before we sold to J&J, we eclipsed Mucinex they had held the number one spot for almost 20 years. So it was through these, you never know who's going to be a catalyst in your life.
Yeah, where things are going to come from. So you sell Cafe Scribe. At that point, do you still have to do something else, or are you set for life if you want to?
I'm not set. The day I sold, I started ruminating on different business.
You knew you wanted to do something else.
In fact, I had created a straw man of a dating app, right? We sold, and 2 weeks later, the iPhone comes out. And I remember going to some of the executives at this company that spot us, and I'm like, hey, we need to get our textbooks on iPhones. And they're like, you're crazy. Like, out of the way. And
2007?
2008.
2008.
Yeah. And they're like, this is kind of nuts. Anyway, so I looked at it, I'm like, oh, this would be interesting for dating apps. No one was doing it. Like Match.com was huge, but they weren't looking at it. And so I started playing around with a dating app, and then I did this kind of advertising platform. And these were just ideas I was writing down in a napkin in the evening and, chatting with friends and trying to figure out. And then Zarbee's came across, my desk a couple different times. And the second time, my buddy was quite insistent that I really spend some time. And once I figured out, hey, I met with Zach, why don't you just run this company? He's like, no, I want to be a pediatrician. I want to stay doing what I want to do. And then I really started looking at allergy, adult, and I'm like, okay, if we can get out of this and, do gummies and other things, this becomes a $4 to $5 billion market.
So you were trying to pivot before you even really jumped.
Well, yeah, I needed to know that we had some sort of product.
You had some runway.
Yeah, somewhere to go. And once I saw that and I started opening up, I'm like, okay, there's potential here. I just didn't know how difficult it was getting. I think one of the most challenging things about Zarbee's is we created a children's brand and went in consumer goods and went to an adult brand. And the only example I could find, when we were doing this, was Cheerios went from children's to adult by creating this heart, thing. But for the most part, heart, yeah.
Yeah.
For the most part, I couldn't find anything else. All the cough products started in adult and then went to children's.
Yeah.
And everything else in the market. And so that was, some buddies that I met in BYU Jerusalem that owned this huge branding agency in New York ended up doing us a solid and doing that B for us. And I remember, sitting on the phone with the co-founders of Zarbee's and, seeing them present like 6 concepts. And that B came up second. And all of us were like, that's it. This is going to be, cut through all and tell our story of, safe, effective, and natural. But the other ones, looked like they could be in Whole Foods and all that stuff. But I remember they were very instrumental in help. The reason why we did it is when I joined Zarbee's, the second day I went with Zach to CVS to meet with the buyer. And her name was Jane, a wonderful lady. And she was there for thick and thin with Zarbee's. And Jane sat down with us and she's like, yeah, I'm not going to take you in. Your branding sucks. And I'm like, oh. And that's just, I wasn't doing consumer goods, right? Before this, I was doing technology. I was doing enterprise software for all my life. I started in development at Accenture. And so when I'm like, oh, this sucks. And Walgreens cut us too, right? Right after I invested my money in Zarbee's, Walgreens cut us. It was the second day. And to this day, my heart goes out to Zach. So I meet Ryan, this other guy named Greg. They allow me to invest in Zarbee's and take over and be CEO. I had certain criteria that I wanted to be able to do this to make it worth my time. And I remember wiring the money, and I wired it on the assumption we had a PO from Walgreens for $1.5 million. And so I'm like, yeah, we're going to.
Were you regional or were you?
No, it was 13,000 stores.
Oh, really?
Oh, you're on nationwide.
Yeah, Zach had already secured that. And so my money was going to be going to the production for that PO.
Okay.
And I will never forget, I wired this money, and the next day Zach calls me up. He's like, hey, dude, look at your email. And the buyer had just cut us. They got a new buyer named Dustin, and he's brand new on the desk. And he's like, I don't want it. I don't want natural. And they were, other than that, it was Harmon's and Associated Foods, and the revenue was pretty dismal. There was no profit. There was no nothing. And I mean, it wasn't horrible, but it was, it was early stage. It was like the first year.
Right.
And Zach sends me this email, and he's like, hey, calls me up and said, I'll wire you the money back, and you take your money out. And I'm like, heck no, dude. Like, this is part of being in a startup. You got to push through.
So you are a gambler.
Well, I get, yeah, that was a gamble. I mean,
In a sense.
that was actually a huge part of my net worth.
So Walgreens got a new buyer.
Yeah.
And they didn't like what the previous buyer had put in place. And they
Cut us. Yeah.
So they can just, at any time.
Oh, yeah.
We're not,
Oh, it happens all
really?
freaking time.
So let's backtrack just a little bit. So Zarbee's, explain for maybe those who don't know kind of the not the origin story, but what Zarbee's is and what that product was at that time. I know you've expanded since then.
Yeah.
When it was pitched to you, came across your desk once, twice, and then finally you said, okay, I'll put some teeth into this. What was it at that point?
It was 2 SKUs. It was a cherry and lime or lemon cough syrup for children. It was in Harmon's and Associated Foods, in kind of limited, and it was being hand stocked by us in the stores. So, the co-founders were out there putting it on the shelves and packaging it, but they did have a very core element of this that it was a secret sauce of the whole company. They were sampling to doctors. So if you were at a Harmon's, we would find the pediatricians around that Harmon's and sample, and that, the goo that you tear off for running and you squirt it in your mouth, that energy. There was a manufacturer down Springville, and we, had them partnered with them, and they were doing our bottling as well. They were doing those samples, and we would walk the samples into a pediatrician's office. Zach had the idea because he was getting samples for Boudreaux's butt paste, and he was like, let's just do this, but do it for the cough syrup. Because, there was, so it was, the white space at the time was children's cough syrup had basically been banned because of dextromethorphan.
Okay.
And Zach just had no option. So he read this clinical study from Penn State showing that there was a double-blind placebo with like Robitussin and buckwheat honey. Buckwheat honey was just as good as Robitussin at curing the cough.
Wow.
So it was clinically shown. And so Zach saw this clinical study, and he's like, well, I'm going to put buckwheat honey and make it for kids and start giving it to moms because I need to give something to them.
Yeah.
And
so it was born out of necessity as a pediatrician.
Born out of a need. Yeah, he had a need, and he saw it, and it was working, and parents called him and said, hey, this works. So he, it was a brilliant idea. We quickly found out that the favorite flavor was grape, not cherry, not lemon. So we, switched to grape quickly, and then so the Walgreens thing, to kind of pull back to that, I said, I'm going to leave my money and we're going to figure out how to make this grow, with independent distributors and other brands. And that was actually crazy because it was really difficult. But through a connection, we were introduced to Les Walgreen, and is the son of the founder or the CEO. Went out and met with him and did a deal where he was a representative of us, and for a period of time he got a nice check. And but he went into his dad and said, Dad, put this back in. That took a while to get that done, but we did get it done, and thankfully it worked out. But there was a blind gamble. If you go back to your gambling thing, Les called me up and he's like, hey, you got 2 options. You can do this thing called pay on scan, or you can do this thing that we have called register rewards. I'm like, well, to explain the pay on scan, because I didn't know what I was. And he said, well, you only get paid once it scans over the register. So you'll send $1.5 million worth of product in.
It's going to sit on the shelves.
It's going to sit on the shelves, and you'll get it once it scans over. I said, what's the other option? He said, it's this thing called registry rewards. I'm like, what is it? And he's like, well, you're going to give away Zarbees for one straight week. And I'm like, well, that sounds like, to me, I thought they were going to pay for that. And I'm like, yeah, sure, we'll sign up for that.
Just give it away.
Give it away. Yeah, well, when you go into Walgreens, you'll see these tags that say free. And what they do is they go up and they say, you can have this for free if you sign up to be a club member or whatever. And so people that are already club members or whatever can just go and grab it off the shelf. I'm like, yeah, we can do that. I didn't see the details.
Yeah. The fine print. Always read the fine print.
Exactly. So I remember we just had I don't know how many thousands of dollars, not a lot in the bank at this point because we don't run production, and I wasn't paying myself. The founders were taking a small check, and they really, went through a lot of pain, those guys. And I remember reading this call from Walgreens from the accounts payable, and they said, hey, you're running the registry awards next week. We just want to make sure you have at least $600,000 in the bank. And I'm like, well, why? And they said, because we're going to pull that. I'm like, well, why are you going to do that? I said, because we're giving your product away. And usually it's between 400 and 600,000. It was 600,000. Oh, and I didn't have, I think I had $100,000 in the bank at that time. And so I quickly called Laura and a lot of other people, and I said, hey, you want to wire money? This is what's going on. And what I found out is typically what happens is Walgreens profits immensely off of this, and it's great for their brand and it's great for their customer because they get this free product. And a lot of the brands that do this, I saw probably 6 brands in the 9 years I was doing Zarbees where I saw do it and not succeed. They failed and they went bankrupt. What happens is they want to see that we were selling 400 bottles a week, and then you do this and we sold whatever 600 divided by $8 was the number of bottles we sold that week. It was a ton. And they want to see that you come back. So we went to the number 6 in the nation, and then we drop back down, and they want to see you come back to 2,000 bottles a week. And we stayed there week after week after week at 2,000 bottles across the 13,000 stores at that time. Most don't have that happen. In fact, the second year we did it again with a new product that Brett and Zach had came up with. And we got that. Not only did we spend $600,000 to do it, but they trashed all the product because it didn't work. And that was really painful. The only benefit is we had El Catterton come in and had invested there, a very sizable and very reputable private equity group that thankfully had invested at that time. So
that's a question I have for you as we start getting into the money of it. How difficult was it for you whether it was with Cafe Scribe or these other, with Zarbees, getting out and pitching? Because you mentioned hundreds of pitches that you've given. Yeah. Was there a learning curve to that? Was it natural to you? Did you like that part of it? Do you not like that part of it? Because you might have an idea, but you got to have money to make that thing move. That's a gasoline, right?
Yeah.
And you have to have both. And I'm interested to know, as you went out and started pitching private equity and really starting to raise capital, what that was like for you and what you learned through that process about yourself and about that.
Yeah, it's addicting.
Really? Yeah, I don't expect that answer.
Yeah, no, I in fact, with LooLoo, I've learned, we're doing this slower and more methodically, so we don't do that. So yeah, Cafe Scribe, I think it did come natural to me. I can't say that I thought I was going to raise $1 million in the first 3 months at Cafe Scribe, 1440 Cafe Scribe, we're going to call that. And it wasn't until the 8 months before we sold that I'd raised about $1 million in that thing. And so it was a lot slower on that. With Zarbees, it was interesting. So I built a very close relationship with a phenomenal, I think the most well-networked person I've ever met in my life is Larry Chu. So Larry was at Wilson Sonsini at the time. He helped me sell Cafe Scribe, and we just became really friends, and we created a fund together. And he's just a phenomenal guy. And he's now Goodwin Procter, one of the lead partners in M&A. Most of the deals he does is around $4 or $5 billion.
Wow.
He's just a giant in the industry. But he's so humble, so kind, so thoughtful, and he loves the entrepreneur. Larry, helped me self-working 40, and then I get Zarbee's, and I flew out to Larry. So to answer your question, it becomes addicting. And with Zarbee's, it became very addicting. It became the success metric of, I can raise this money. That's a validation point that the company is good. And it's not. The best validation is you got customers that are buying and buying again, and that they're buying for the right price, and there's, and you can actually make it work.
If you thought at the time, I can raise this capital.
Yes.
It's validating what I already know, that we have a great product that we can bring to market, that people want, that people need.
Yes.
And you found out that it's actually not that. It's
not.
You need the consumers.
You need the consumer.
The market decides.
And again, Zarbee's was not cut and dry. Every day I'm like, is this really going to work? Does this good enough for, kids? Does it work, enough? Because, there are questions out there about, so many simple things you can't really tell. Like an elderberry gummy has the clinical data showing that elderberry is great for your immune system when you're sick. But you can't tell that it works. You have to, and that was one of our, you can't tell on melatonin. That was a Zach idea, and the melatonin for kids was pushed. We got a lot of pushback on, but it's a phenomenal product now. But going back to Larry, and so I get this. I sink my teeth into Zarbee's, and I flew out to San Francisco to meet with Larry. And I'm like, hey, it's been 3 years since we sold. Here's what I'm doing. And he looked at it and he's like, are you crazy? I'm like, no, dude, this is gonna be awesome. And I left him with. He introduced me to some people at Piper Jaffray and some phenomenal M&A people that looked at it and they're like, hey, this is kind of interesting. But I left the product with Larry, and he had 2 or 3 kids at the time, and 1 or 2 of them got sick. And I had the same experience where I actually used Zarbee's. That was another big catalyst. I used on my kids, and my wife and I were like, oh, it actually worked. And I remember Larry calling me and he's like, hey, dude, my kids got sick and we used it, and that worked. It was awesome. He's like, I think you should send a sample to this guy named Pete Mullick, who worked at the time at this innovation company. He's now at a PE firm. And so I sent this care package to Pete, and he called me up. He's like, dude, this is genius. You need to send to this guy named Scott Dankey at L Catterton. And so Scott Dankey's the lead partner at L Catterton. I sent him a care package. And then this guy named Michael Farello calls me up, and he's like, hey, can you fly out? We'd like to meet with you.
And he was in L Catterton?
Yeah, he's at L Catterton. He was the lead partner in the growth fund.
When you sent that package out, have you spoken to him yet?
No, I hadn't called to send a package. And I mean, Pete had suggested they look very closely at this. And Larry and Pete were roommates in college, and they had a really tight relationship. And Larry's like, Bryce is, going to hammer down on this. He's going to push this through. And Pete was kind enough to make that introduction. And, it goes without saying, we were having success. Like, we had done that Walgreens thing, and we were having success. And they pulled that Nielsen data, and they looked at it, and they're like, hey, there's something here. People keep on buying this.
There's some traction.
There's some traction. And the secret sauce with that sampling, we had actually been in Walmart at that time, and we were in 350 Walmarts, and we carpet bombed all the pediatricians around Walmart, and it was working. So, Michael Farello, bless his soul, calls me up. He's like, hey, fly out. We want to talk to you. And so I flew out. And I remember vividly sitting down with him and another associate there. I'm trying to remember her name, but phenomenal lady. And I gave him the pitch, and in 8 minutes or something on a couch, and they looked at me and said, okay, we want to invest. I'm like, really? And they said, yeah, how much you raising? I said, $1 million, maybe 2 million. They're like, yeah, that's not going to work. I'm like, well, what do you mean? Like, a minimum is 10 million. And at the time, we were the smallest startup they had ever invested in. They usually were hitting 10 million in revenue with $1 million in EBITDA was their criteria in the consumer space. But they said, will you think about this? And they gave me an LOI right there, and I get in their black limo, and they send me back to the airport. I'm looking at this, and I'm like, holy freak.
Were you like, we've got something bigger here than what I might even...
I should have thought that. No, I went back. We actually had 2 other options too. We had another group locally that wanted to buy us outright and run it. And they were a supplement company. They're a phenomenal group. And then TPG in San Francisco had kicked the tires too. And they're just as big, probably not as big as Catterton, but so we had some options. And so I went back to Zach and the co-founders and sat down with them and said, hey guys, these are our options. What do you want to do? I didn't want to push anything, and we, looked at it. And we're like, let's do the elk. I mean, Elk Catterton had done, like, at the time, they were in PF Chang's, they were in Noodles and Co. I mean, they did Birkenstock just recently, right? And Restoration Hardware. They were in Restoration Hardware. I mean, they had so many huge brands that I was like, Kettle Chips. I mean, they really had a phenomenal background. Now the L is Louis Vuitton Group.
Okay.
As they merged with them after.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Okay.
So they're like a 15, maybe a 20 billion. They're ginormous now. And anyway, so Michael Frillo made that offer, and then we decided let's do this. And then Scott Denke flew out, and I was amazed that he flew out because he had so many things going. And he was at the top of that group, and he flies out, and he happened to have a house in Deer Valley, and he's like, well, I'm going to be on your board. And he looked at, we were in such a piece of junk. I mean, sort of like LooLoo, we're in a piece of junk.
Back of a warehouse. And
he's like, well, there's no leasing issue here because we were month to month, and that's how we are with LooLoo. We signed the deal and moved forward. It was awesome. But
What year was that?
that was 2011.
Okay.
Oh, so that was soon, because you came on in 2010?
It's a little bit before that.
Okay. Yeah. And so him coming on the board, that was a question I had for you. When we spoke previously about LooLoo,
Yeah.
you talked a lot about the team that Elk Catterton brought in.
Yeah.
What is the importance to you, and what is the importance everyone should look at when, going out on your own or whatever you're doing and building a team? What do you look for in team members? How important is it to surround yourself with the right team?
So it was critical to have, so I didn't have any real consumer background.
Yeah.
I was in tech. So, 2014 when I stepped down as CEO, so I'd run it for about 4.5 years, something like that. And, Catterton came to me and they said, hey, we have an option of bringing in some, chomps that have serious deep background in, consumer. And I'm like, you know what, listen, I'm the third largest in terms of shareholder. I mean, Catterton have the most, but I'd still put in every round. And so I had a lot of equity, and I'm like, it was easy at first to say that, but it was so hard to let go of the reins.
Was that ego, or was it?
I just wanted to be part of it,
Was it a little bit of a blow, like, hey, I can do this, or I'm very, but maybe someone can do it better? I mean, was that a reality?
No, the reality check was that, the guy that brought in was phenomenal and knew his stuff, and he brought in a team that, I've been able to, work with a couple of them at LooLoo, that just have phenomenal consumer brand, Gillette, Sonicare, Oral-B, Sony. I mean, they were
really connection.
Yeah, there's a lot to do in terms of how you position pricing, packaging. But what I will say is, what I look for, to go back to your question, when I invest in startups, I've got like 30 or 40 investments in startups. The ones that work are usually guys that don't know what the crap they're doing. Like they're really just, they have grit.
They can work. They'll figure it out.
Yeah, they may not. Well, they're usually pretty smart, but I don't know where they are on the IQ test. But they're more than anything, they're willing to just focus and work hard.
Yeah.
And they don't necessarily come from top schools or anything like that. They just work hard and are willing to not give up. And there is that balance of, I had to do that. I had to, I guess, fail on that, mobile game, and that was hard. But for me, I now look at the investments that haven't done well are ones that are really, really seasoned guys that want so much, cash flow and so much cash to do everything. Where I find it is more healthy to be eager and focused and
naive.
Yeah, and almost like, I don't know how hard it is. LooLoo, we've been doing this for a while, but for Ryan and I think Annette and Craig and some of the other team members, Scott, we see the markers that it's going to take time and effort and work, but there's something special, and and be patient, so there will be a time where we'll probably need to go, build out and get someone like an Al Catterton to help out, but we're not there yet. So
with Zarbee's, 2018, is that when Johnson & Johnson acquired Zarbee's?
Yeah.
With the founder story, because I know you're pressed for time, so I want to get to LooLoo. Was the founder story a big part of selling that to not only Walgreens or getting in Walmart, CVS, but also raising capital, or was that not as important? I'm just interested to know if the founder story was a key element, or if it was just numbers. This is going to work. We like it. Like you fly out, and L Catterson's like, we're not going to invest this much. We want to invest this much.
Yeah. So Zach was core to, it was his idea, and he really came up with a lot of innovation pipeline and elements. Not all of them do we do, but that's not what they invested in the numbers. They invested in what they saw and the space and the potential and the secret sauce of, sampling. That is what I think, got them excited. And natural was hot, natural, we were able to get, the CEO of Burt's Bees involved in the board, and phenomenal guy named John Replicable, and I kind of idolize the guy. He has such a phenomenal ability to operate and see opportunities. He's actually helped out quite a bit on LooLoo, introducing us to the fragrance house and manufacturing and a lot of other things. But I think it was those numbers that help those. There are a lot of PE. They like the numbers.
Or numbers.
Yeah, they're not emotional.
Yeah, it's a lot more around the numbers. I will say that it was funny. There's a PE guy here named Rhett Nuenschwander who runs Tower Arch Capital, and he also goes to he lived in our neighborhood, and at church one day he comes up. This is when they're doing due diligence, Catterton. He comes up to me in the hall and he's like, "Dude, I just got a call from." He was Harvard grad, and we got a call from Catterton asking about you. Like, I didn't know him very well.
Asking about you personally.
Yeah, during the due diligence time. Like, I gave them names of the prior private equity group and other people and board members that were involved in the former startup. They do want to make sure you have integrity. And
wow.
So I was stunned at how deep they went on my background checks.
Yeah, that's crazy. Finding out who you live by, any connections.
Yeah, they wouldn't protect their capital.
Wow.
That's interesting. So 2018, sell out, big payday. And how long until what do you do at that point? Because obviously it's just interesting to me when people hit doubles, triples, grand slams, home runs, whatever you want to call it, and financially they've kind of got what they need. But then I think you probably answered this question. It's addicting, and you love to go out and you love the challenge. And what did you do after that? Like, did you sit around for a while? Did you just go out on your ski boat and chill? Did you go rock climbing for a couple of years? Or did you jump right back into the next opportunity?
Yeah, I know I'm not a person that I jumped in, and probably too quickly. So I jumped in. I had this mobile game idea that was, after I stepped down as CEO, I was chairman of the board and stayed on, and was, I was going to board meetings until we sold. But during that time, I invested in a lot of startups. One of my favorites that I'm still involved in, I'm not in the advisory board, but it's called Thuma.
Have your bed.
Yeah, I'd love that. So that's a Reed's bed, and he's one example of a guy that caught lightning in a bottle in a way that I've never seen in my life. That is a phenomenal company, and it's him and But I met him in the seafood restaurant, San Francisco. Larry introduced. He's like, Larry called me. He's like, "Dude, we got to invest in this." So, and I just flew out to meet with Reed, and I met with him, sat down. He showed me a PowerPoint, hadn't launched. I'm like, okay, this is interesting. And this guy's he's got credit more than I've ever seen. He was driving a piece of junk Honda Accord, living in the basement on, no bed, of some group. And so was co-founders, and they were delivering the early beds by, in their van.
Yeah.
But he put together a vision and executed in a way I've never seen before. The growth on that, and I can't really give numbers, but it was astronomical what they did.
Yeah.
3 years. And we did have a little bit of exit there. Some PE came in and pulled, and we were allowed to take some money off the table, but I'm grateful that I'm still involved in that in a financial way. But getting back to, I've lost my train of thought. So I was investing, and I knew I'm not the guy that goes skiing every day or rock climbing. I can't do that. My ADHD gets better of me. I want something. I want to have purpose, that I'm building something. And I think Becky, she's like, you got to go to the office. You should go, it's good for you. And so I sunk my teeth into that mobile game and did that for a couple of years. And, it was really fun, great educational experience. We had 3 different options to exit. I should have taken one that was the most prominent. We would have lost half the capital, but better than losing all your capital. Right. We ended up losing all the capital. We should have exited to this Finnish company that had eyes on us, and they made an offer, and I should have just taken that, but I didn't. Really good learning experience, and that was a bummer because I had to call up some close friends of mine and say, "Hey, I've lost 50 grand a year or whatever I lost," and but the only consolation, like, you didn't lose what I lost.
Yeah.
So I could have put my kids all through Harvard too.
Yeah.
So we can, just for the sake of time, we want to hit on some of the ones that you've been involved in, maybe crash and burned or didn't see.
That was the main one
that you thought would have from those. And it goes back to my question earlier. How do you know when it's time to get out or we need to pivot? Is it just a feeling? Is it the numbers purely? What is it that says, hey, maybe it's time to move on?
So there's one example where I personally said, hey, let's bullet plug. And that was the gaming app, and it was called GameIt. And we pivoted 3 significant times. We did have some good data, but it was even when we put on the rose-colored glasses, it wasn't the right data.
Couldn't convince yourself.
And so we'd written some last checks into it personally, me and my co-founder, to keep the lights on, and we'd try to sell it. And after the last try on selling to Dove Park City Group that does a lot of mobile games, I just said, you know what, dude, I don't know how we get out of this. We were at one point we were doing 100 grand a month, but we were, we couldn't retain. Like with LooLoo, we retain. I was just looking at our metrics. 40% of our customers are return customers right now, and our revenue percentage of refills is a decent portion.
It's let's jump to LooLoo because I have this product in my house.
Yeah,
we have it here at the office. Once you have, to be honest with you, the light is so.
Yeah, the light's the best part.
The light's beautiful.
We have fewer returns of the light.
But once you have it in your house for 60, 90 days, and you get used to the way it operates, the light obviously is an added bonus feature, but it works.
Yeah.
And once you have it, doesn't surprise me with the retention, because now if it's not there, it would seem weird.
Yeah.
So tell, what is LooLoo? Why did you get involved? I know you're heavily involved right now. That's
all we're doing.
Yeah, that's your baby. What is it? Where's it at right now? What's the growth pattern look like? And what's it taken to get where we're at today?
Yeah. So LooLoo started out with, so we exited Zarbee's. I had started another company I was selling doors on Home Depot. We were importing doors from, that were kind of unique.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. And there were home doors like that. But
what does that have to do with cough syrup or something?
Nothing. I just had another guy from Berkeley that, he's like, hey, dude, this is going to be really, and we got into Home Depot. We were just shipping them out of our warehouse. And we had 2 other co-founders in LA. That was an example where I got involved where we had basically 4 heads of a company. It was split quarter, and there was I think you have to have one person that really is going to be, like Ryan and I have a great working relationship, and we both invested the same amount of money. And, we have our roles in our space, and Ryan is a great compliment to my, he's out, he steps out and looks in and in a way that I don't, where I'm kind of sometimes in the details, like I'm in, really detailed stuff. And not that he actually gets into details like I can't believe, but it's great to have a complimentary founder. I like co-founders.
You like to be in the weeds.
I do like to be in the weeds.
I like to be in the weeds.
Yeah, I love it. But Rand can do things that I never imagined. And then there's Scott, who's an engineer. And you have to have engineers that, or you have to have founders that will help move this thing in the right way. And so going back to So LooLoo is a toilet spray, toilet freshener. It sits on the side of your toilet. It automates it. So Poopery has created the space of spray before you go. That's their tagline. And they've crushed it. They're the 300-pound gorilla. And she's done phenomenal at creating a brand that's, I think probably 99% of America recognizes. And she's got great distribution, phenomenal execution. And, a close buddy of mine that I work in student government at Alta with calls me up. He runs a big pest control company. He's like, hey, I just saw this pitch of this company. And I think it's genius. I went in and I looked at it. I met him at IHOP, and I actually said no to the I call him the inventor. I said, no, I don't want to do this. And I kind of laughed at the space. And then he kept on, he was pretty persistent. Taylor was his name, and he phenomenal, bright, genius mind. He's very smart. And anyway, he's like, I want to do this. And so I invested, Shannon invested, and Ryan, we just exited Zarbee's. And so we invested each kind of equally. And then there came a point where it struggled, and he needed to make a different, move in his life. And so, actually, there were a variety of reasons. I'm not going to go into the details, but it ended up where I was in the gym one day, and I was telling Shannon and Ryan, hey guys, we're probably going to lose our money. I don't know what we're going to do. I tried to sell it with Taylor to a variety of different companies, both in the aluminum space. And at that time it was aerosol, and the cogs didn't work. There was a lot of things that were problematic. And Ryan and I are sitting there, and Ryan's like, Bryce, what are you doing? I'm like, well, I'm in this door company, but I want to sell it. And anyway, I ended up getting out of that and selling it to other owners and getting my money back. And he's like, well, it's good to have purpose. What if we did this? I'm like, are you serious? And he's like, yeah, let me make a proposal to you guys. So it was not me that made the decision. I was like, well, why don't you make a proposal to Taylor? And because we had to do a recap of the equity, because Taylor owned the majority of the company, and it was
Taylor was the inventor.
Yeah, he was the inventor, and a phenomenal guy, the kindest,
young kid.
Yeah, but he was like top of his class at BYU in accounting, and worked for a consulting company, and took the leap. He took the leap for a couple of years on LooLoo. But LooLoo is it's a lot of challenge, and it's not easy. But Ryan proposed this, and I'm like, sure, make a proposal. And his proposal was like, you invest 50%, I invest 50%. We recap this whole thing, and let's go and resolve. Is there product market fit? Can we advertise for, and can we redo the entire product, so that we can make the cost of goods sold work? So we did that for during COVID. We had 1,000 units and then we had like maybe 5 times that in refills. And we wanted to see what people did with the old LooLoo, and it worked. People were refilling them. They loved it. There were a lot of problems with that product. And one of the biggest is aerosol and the way it was packaged and the cost of goods. We're like, there is something here. So it's, so we ran into this guy, Scott, and Scott took us, went to China with them and introduced us to some manufacturing. And John Replicable introduced us to one that ends up, they're our partner, and they're a great partner. Anyway, so there's a lot of, and then that's when I had a great guy that I worked with at Zarbee's, and he's Mike Kudamash, called me up and he's like, hey, I would like to do this. And he's such a good sales execution guy. And so he came and got involved, and he ended up bringing in Annette Dominic, who, she helps him. She's a phenomenal CMO, marketing brand. And also this guy named Craig Johnson, who works on sales, and we've just been working through it, so growth wise, first year was like, I think 50% growth. Last year was 220% growth, and this year, first quarter was 23 or 24% growth. And what I see as the most significant is the repurchasing. The product love. I see more product love here than I saw ever at Zarbee's. I mean, mine's edition is high. Yeah, well, and people just absolutely falling in love with it. And I don't know if you guys have the new fragrance, but we just reformulated our fragrances, and
Ryan was telling me I don't have it yet.
It's got this odor blocking tech. It's freaking outstanding. So I need to get you some. You need. Well, on your way home, just stop by the warehouse. Right? Maybe if you live near Max, I can just have him buy some. It really is amazing.
How does somebody get the product? Is it strictly Amazon, straight through the website? Like, if people want to get it, where do they?
So it's on Amazon and our website, and we're about to get launched on Sharper Image, and And we're talking to a couple other interesting online groups, and then Walmart.com, and then Ace Hardware. We just finished up a show. They're going to be in the Utah Aces, Idaho, and some in Pennsylvania. That's what I'm going to be doing after this call. It's actually I go fix some orders.
Yeah.
But it is also in Zerkers here locally.
Okay.
It's a high price item for Zerkers, to be honest. And we did go in CVS, 150 stores, and it actually didn't work out so well. It was, I think, too high a price. And where Ace, the Ace managers are putting videos, and we're actually putting LooLoos on every toilet for the store.
Okay.
And we're putting posters in the bathrooms.
Awesome.
So there's awareness that's going to be on the local level that will be very helpful.
Yeah.
You mentioned that all the way back to Cafe Scribe, the awareness and getting the consumers to actually know about the product.
Yeah.
You're kind of on the heels of already a toilet fragrance, right?
Mm-hmm.
So there's a need there.
Yep.
And I got to imagine like that barrier is tough, but doable, and you just have to keep chiseling away at it. I love the fact, Bryce, that you're just in the weeds, dude.
Yeah.
It's so fun. It's cool. And I know Ryan a little bit, and he's a big picture guy. I'm sure the two of you like mesh together really well. With the partners that you've had, is there some compromise with a founder and team members as you go through these journeys? Does an entrepreneur, do you have to be flexible? Because I think most entrepreneurs, they kind of have I wouldn't say an ego, but they have some conviction, right?
Yeah.
And do you have to kind of be malleable with that conviction with all these other partners that are likely very similar to you as far as, their energy?
So far I have not had that, I think, with Zarbee's, Zach, he wasn't there as a daily operator. I did have him, once we got funding, I said, hey, why don't you spend at least one day, come in and, do R&D with us. And so he ended up doing that, which is great. Rob Christensen was a complete compliment. I mean, he had all the tech. He managed the engineers, where I was out going to the cells and, raising money. And so it was a great compliment. I absolutely adore. Rob actually went to Zarbee's and was fundamentally, very critical there. And then, so he and I have done a couple different startups together. And I've also introduced speech to some other startups that he's done incredibly well at. With Ryan, he is, I don't know how to say, he's so freaking bright, but he's also willing to roll up his sleeves and get dirty. Like LooLoo is designed predominantly what way it is because of Ryan and Scott. Ryan, all his like farm boy, thinking in motocross and pistons and this. I mean, he thinks like an engineer. I call him the closet engineer.
Yeah.
Because I remember when we first started this, we were doing outside. We were doing 3PL. Someone else was doing all the fulfillment. We're looking at the numbers like, this doesn't make sense. I'm gonna have my daughter do it in my garage. So Ryan's daughter, I think it was Sarette or Elle, started doing the fulfillment out of the garage. And I'm like, this is awesome. And then we were, come back from China and Scott, who was the engineer, is like, hey, we need to do this, this, and that. And Ryan freaking goes out and buys a 3D printer and starts printing these things up in a garage. And I'm like, are you serious? I'm like, yeah, how do you get these files? But he just wasn't afraid. It made me less afraid to do stuff.
Yeah.
Anyway, I love that. So I think I've never had something where I felt like a lot of friction with the co-founders. I've just absolutely adore it and just love learning from Nat, Ryan, Craig, all the, and I learned so much from the youth, like the people that we have in there doing a lot of the groundwork are innovative. And, I'm losing my ops guy that I've had for like 3 years. He's moving on, but I learned a lot from him.
What would you tell a young person right now who thinks he's got some Bryce in him?
Yeah.
That he's an entrepreneur, he's got an idea. What would you tell that kid, that 20-year-old, 22-year-old? What would you tell your kid if he said he wanted to do his own startup right now?
When I say it takes quite a bit of brain damage to want to do one because it hurts so bad, or a high pain threshold. But I usually try to suggest it, like when I go to Berkeley and guest speak, I said, hey, make sure you have, a product, a market that's big enough and there's a product market fit, that you're not trying to solve for a problem that doesn't exist. You don't want to create a solution for a problem that isn't there. and trying to get something as quickly as possible. I advise a lot of people to do things on the side until you find that there's a demonstration that there's something there. But at some point you're going to have to do that gamble, and you're going to have to leave the comfort zone. What I try to do is say, hey, make sure you're willing to live hungry, because it's hard, and you're going to have a lot of difficult nights, and but it's so fun. But it's absolutely such a riot. So it's hard to kind of sum up, like, how do you see? It's really build that confidence yourself. One thing I do tell everybody: have advisors, have people that have done it, get involved, and give them some part of the company that's and there's different ways to slice that, but hopefully they end up being investors as well. But someone that can help guide you. Amora was invaluable to me. Like I needed her to get through those dark spots. Having a partner, my wife, was absolutely so important.
You mentioned that a few times. I think that's a key, and it's having that
patient,
cohesive partner.
Yeah, that supports you, because if she's not on board and if she doesn't have the confidence, she may not always have to like the product, but or even be a buyer, but you need that support network. And so I always suggest get advisors, get good lawyers. I think lawyers can, some people laugh at that one, but I think they're pretty important.
Yeah. We've all seen Shark Tank and heard the stories.
Yeah.
Well, Bryce, thank you.
Yes.
This has been enlightening for me, and your journey's awesome.
Thanks.
And I'm super, super just impressed with you and everything you've done. And I'm really excited to see what happens with LooLoo as we kind of go throughout time.
Yeah. So am I.
Thank you, my friend.
Thanks, Bryce.
Yeah.
Good to have you.
Yeah, appreciate it.